This video presents a simple overview of Chronicle's microservices framework and shows how to send events between two microservices. We will also show how to use the Chronicle test framework to test these. Chronicle Services allows you to set up simple, single-threaded microservices that are interconnected using Chronicle queues. Chronicle queues are unidirectional, so we need one queue to send the event from the first service to the second service, and one to go in the opposite direction. To demonstrate the microservices, on the second microservice we'll implement a simple sum method that can add two numbers together, x and y, and then return a result, z. This means that our input queue will need to send the message sum x, y, and the output queue will return the result, z. Now we are going to build this out in IntelliJ, where each microservice is single-threaded and testing is at the heart of our methodology. This will allow you to express your business logic in some very simple and easy-to-read unit tests. Most of this Maven project structure has been built in advance. In the POM file, we set up Chronicle Services as a project dependency and downloaded it from Chronicle's Nexus server. It is worth noting that Chronicle Services is a licensed product. As testing is at the heart of this example, we will start by writing a test that provides our input data of two numbers, and then checks that the output is the expected sum of these two numbers. Both input and output are contained in YAML files in the test folder. The input file should contain the message we want to send to the sum service imp, and our output file will contain the result. The additional syntax in these files is used internally by the testing framework. Next, let's build out our interfaces. Firstly, the sum service will receive two values of x and y so that we can then add them together. Secondly, the responder expects just one value, our summed result. Now we will build out our two microservices. From the diagram, we know that SumServiceImp will be taking in the sum and sending out the result. Hence, it will implement our SumService interface, and the responder is what will be sent out. The functionality will be our summer values x and y, and so these values will be added together in this SumServiceImp. Now we need a service to run this, hence we will build out the Run SumServiceImp. As it receives the result, it needs to implement responder, and we have also implemented Service Lifecycle Listener. For its output, we need to have a sum service and have it print out our result. And finally, the start method from the Service Lifecycle Listener gets called upon startup. To check that this works, let's build out our test called SumTest. For this, we can use a YAML tester. We need to provide it with the directory to find our test files, the output, in this case the result, and finally a service, which for us would be the SumServiceImp. As you can see here, the directory of our test files are under test sum, so we need to provide our test case with this. Now let's run the test case. It does not show an error, so initially this looks fine, but just so we can see the results, let's go back into our SumServiceImp and see what happens when we add +1 to our sum calculation. Now when we run this, we are able to click on this to see the differences and also see our error. Now that we know our test is working, we can start to build out our configuration file. This contains two parts. The first part is made up of the queues, and the second part is made up of the services. Looking back at our diagram, we have the sum queue and the result queue. Hence, we need to reflect this in the config file. We need to give each of them a name, sum and result, and a source ID, 1 and 2. Now we need to build out our two services. Each service has an input, an output, and an implementation class. Firstly, we have the sum service, which has an input of sum and an output of result. The implementation class we can get from the service itself. Secondly, we have the Run Sum service. This time, its input is result, and its output is sum. Finally, we need a class to run this, so we will build out main. We start with this line of run all, and add in the name of our config file that we want to run. So in this case, it is services.yaml. So that we clear our data after each run, we can also add in a line that deletes directories with files starting in data before it runs our config file. Because it will look for data in the file name, we just need to add this into our config file in front of our queue names of sum and result. Finally, it is worth noting that this final line disables the current thread for thread scheduling purposes, as the previous line of run all runs its own thread pool. Now that all our files and classes are built, let's run this. As we can see, we get our expected result of 10. For more information about Chronicle services or our other products, email us at info@chronicle.software.